You know, I would never be who I am if I had not been raised within the Muslim Ummah and within the Ismaili community. And there were a couple of lessons that you always learned. The first was the importance of seva, the importance of service. No matter how little you have, there's someone who has less. And so issues around volunteerism, around making the community better, around leaving it better than you found it, were just instilled in me from the very, very beginning. So for me, I found it very comfortable to be in a space in Calgary where there were things like public libraries and public education. That just made sense to me, that part of the job of society is to ensure that everyone in society has the ability to live up to their full potential. And so I spend a lot of my time these days talking about seva, about the importance of selfless service. I feel that in times that are so divisive, where people seem so angry and tribal, that the concept of seva, about working for one another, is one of the tools that can help get us out of all of this. And that really is something that I was always raised with. You know, the Ismaili community runs only on volunteers. Our clergy are volunteers. The folks who work in the vast bureaucracy of committees and so on are all volunteers. Today, we needed a volunteer to come here and open the door for us so that we could film in the Jamaat Khana. And it's just something you always do. And I've been very lucky that my family has been very blessed with lots of opportunities for seva. You know, my parents were the first clergy members of the first Jamaat Khana in Calgary. And since then, we've been able to do lots of things locally, nationally, and internationally. And so that's always just been important to me. It's been very second nature. And when I first became mayor, I was actually a bit surprised that I had to explain the concept of service sometimes. One of the biggest initiatives I did when I was mayor, which I continue to do, I literally brought it home because it's a giant 5-foot fall foam number 3, is a concept called 3 Things for Canada, where we encourage every citizen every year to do at least 3 acts of community service, 3 acts of seva. And that really is very deeply rooted in my own faith background, as well as in the way that I was raised. So I was not the first person of color to be a mayor in Canada, nor was I, in fact, the first Muslim to be a mayor in Canada. This has happened in small towns and villages in the past. I was, however, the first person of color to be the mayor of a major Canadian city. I was the first Muslim to be the mayor of a major city in the Western world. And I always have to remind, although I don't know him, in my mind, I'm always reminding Sadiq Khan, the mayor of London, I was there first. And we are seeing increasing waves of hate crime, of Islamophobia, of other challenges. I have to go back to that story and ask myself, how is it that no one cared what I looked like or where I worshipped when I ran, yet we're still having so many issues in the community around people who don't feel that they can live lives of full dignity or potential here? So the summer of 2020 was very hard for me. After the murder of George Floyd, we had huge rallies, protests in the middle of a global pandemic around anti-racism, around Black Lives Matter, around Indigenous Lives Matter, around the whole concept of racism in our community. And we invited people in Calgary for the first time to come to City Hall, or come virtually, we were in a pandemic, just to tell their stories about racism. And we invited everyone, all Calgarians, and I underline all Calgarians, to come talk about racism. And I sat there and I listened to these stories. And most of my colleagues on City Council were shocked by what they were hearing. 3 of us were not shocked. And you can probably guess what binds together the 3 of us who were not shocked. But then I thought about it some more and I said, you know what? If I've got 21-year-old men coming and telling me about how difficult their life can be when they're followed in the store, or how they're treated by the police, or what happens when they go to a club. I didn't even know there still were clubs. I'm old. But if they were telling those stories that my friends told when we were 21, and now 30 years later we're telling the same stories, then everything we talk about pluralism and diversity and multiculturalism in Canada feels a little bit hollow. And that was very hard for me, because how do I, at the same time, hold in my heart and my brain the fact that I'm very proud of what we've built in Canada, what the Aga Khan has called, and I always misquote him, but something like the most successful example of pluralism in human history, with the fact that we've got a long way to go towards true anti-racism, where everyone in our community can feel that they live a life of equal potential. That was hard for me. It's still hard for me. But I think you can have both thoughts. I think you can be very proud of where we are. There's nowhere in the world I'd rather be having this conversation than right here, but also understand the conversation and action coming from the conversation still needs to be had. While we have seen hate crimes and generalized Islamophobia increase over the last few years, there's also been a countervailing thing, which is horrible because it's countervailing because Muslims have been the victims of so much crime. So among much of society, there's a countervailing trend, which is enormous sympathy for Muslims. And I find that so strange. But, you know, people understand after the horrific incidents in Quebec City and in London, Ontario, what we see so often, even in places like Edmonton and Calgary, for young women who are wearing the hijab in the community. All of this awfulness has also engendered a great deal of sympathy. And, you know, we're seeing, particularly we're seeing women in hijab take on bigger roles in society, and people just accept that now. You know, we have a national news anchor who's a hijabi woman now. And no one really said anything, right? She's just a great news anchor. And so what I wonder about is how do we hang on to that wave of sympathy and help people understand it's not enough to say our thoughts and prayers are with you, but that we have to look at the systemic structural things. So let's never forget that in the province of Quebec, where there was a massacre in a mosque in the capital city, within sight of the legislature, that same province is one of the only places in the world that restricts Muslim women from certain jobs. So how do we make the connection between the sympathy for people living their daily lives and the structural things that we need to change in order to make sure everyone can live a life of dignity? And to me, that's the tough part, because there's still a disconnect in too much policy from what we see on the street and the structural and institutional racism, the structural and institutional constructs that are preventing people from living their full lives of potential. The power and resilience of humanity can overcome anything. And indeed, at the beginning of the pandemic, it was the same thing. People really, really looking after one another. And one of the biggest shames for me is now that we're sitting here 2.5 years after the start of the pandemic, is how much we have allowed that to break down in our public consciousness. I tell you, it's still there. If you were to put on your social media, I have COVID, I guarantee you people you barely know would be dropping meals at your house. It's still there, but we're not allowing it to be our narrative. We're allowing ourselves to be taken over by the narrative of division rather than the narrative of humanity.
Majority of my life, alhamdulillah, I've been rooted in service. There's something that my mom and dad said when I first started out my art. The first paycheck I got as an artist, they said, give it to us, we're sending it to Somalia. I was like, that's my money. They're like, yeah, Ahmed, the more you give, the more you get. And I was like, that sounds crazy, but it's not. The world is based on relationships. So if you're giving, there is no way that you're not going to get that back in one form or another. Now, it may not be the exact same, and you shouldn't look for it. I gave you 50, I'm going to get 50 back. Don't look at it like that. It may be $50 in an opportunity. It may be something totally different. The reason I'm even here today is because of volunteering. And so for me, by giving, the more I got back. Even when I met Michael Jean, was through me doing a volunteering thing at the Jasper Place High School, where I work with students after school on Thursdays for about an hour, helping them with their English or even their public presentation stuff. And through that, people saw me and then provided me more opportunities. And so the more you give, the more you get, because that gives an opportunity for people to see you in the community and the service that you are doing. Service doesn't always have to be going to a soup kitchen. It could mean, I'm a good videographer. Would you like me to support you and create a video for you? I'm a poet, I can create narrative for you. Would you like me to do this for you? It could be, hey, my aunt doesn't have a ride, maybe support her once a week. These type of things are seem small, but in the long term are grand, because you don't get to see the reward, but it's happening. So don't seek the reward, give this service, but it always comes back. Politics was created for people who are wealthy and have time. If you don't have wealth and time, it's extremely challenging. Because if you have no one to support you, you have no data to get elected, then it's challenging. So what I would say is it may take a long time, but persevere and continue to work towards that. There's a reason why we haven't had a Muslim or a person of African descent in city council in the history of Edmonton, is because of that perseverance. I would say it sucks, it's challenging, but it's possible. So it's overwhelming, but it's possible.
And people were saying Muslims don't belong to this country and they go back to where you came from. So then what I did, I was doing my PhD at University of Bournemouth in United Kingdom, and I saw that there was not a single Muslim who could come in the national media, Canadian national media, and stand up for Muslim, stand up for Islam. So what I did, I forgot my PhD and I said, no, I need to get into this. I used to work at that time for IBM in a very senior position in IBM. But with my work, I started reaching out in the national media, Muslim community, non-Muslim community. I went to almost 300 churches across this country. I established interfaith dialogues, which was not as frequent as now you see today. And I invited people to ask me questions. During my multi-faith walk against violence, that was the intent. A lot of people, a lot of Canadians, thousands of Canadians over the 7 months, 6,500 kilometers, they came to me and they asked very poking questions. But I always say, Islam is a common sense, natural, normal way of life. There is even the smallest thing is not nonsense in Islam. So people will ask poking questions and they have the right to ask. But I think we should have the answer. If we don't have the answer, then we should go and ask somebody who has the answer. And by the grace of Almighty God, by the training of my teachers, my murshid, I was able to convey them what is the message of Islam, how Muslims have lived for the last 14, 15 centuries with Christians and Jews and people of other books, people of other faiths and no faith. And by the grace of God, Wall Street Journal wrote a story on me, quarter-page story on Wall Street Journal in New York. And the reporter came to Calgary and she interviewed those Christians and Jewish and other people who were attending my class. It's called Islam 101. In Islam 101, there were more than 300 Christians and Jews and Hindus, non-Muslims were there. And Wall Street reporter asked them question, why are you attending this Islamic preacher's course? Everybody said that when he speaks, we understand. They went to Calgary police. They asked them the question, this Alberta is called Bible Belt. So this Islamic preacher is preaching in Bible Belt, and a lot of Christians are attending his classes. And the police also said, back right after 2001, 9/11 tragedy in New York, police said the least crime at that time committed against Muslims were in Calgary. And he says the reason is the Sohrawardi ran a campaign of Islam awareness, and that helped Muslim community as well as non-Muslim community to get to know what Islam is.
I think because I'm a revert, I've experienced this in a kind of different way. I lived my life for 23 years as an Italian Albertan, fairly integrated into society. So when I became a Muslim, and especially when I became a visible Muslim, I think one of the things that I noticed right away was that people automatically assumed that I was less educated, that I was less capable of critical thinking. I have people who are surprised when they hear my voice doesn't have an accent, which disturbs me deeply for my sisters who do have an accent. How are they being perceived? And it also signaled to me that your acceptability within a particular society is really on how well you can kind of assimilate or integrate according to the standards of that society. And at the surface level, that might not seem like much, in terms of like visibly integrating and things like that. But at the root level, there are certain things that Muslims have a hard time subscribing to, like hyper-individualist society and things like that. So I guess for myself, what I really noticed was this kind of overt attention being paid to whether or not I fit to the standards of the particular society, which I had never really, it's a standardization I had never really experienced before when I wasn't seen as an other. And so that's something that's been really overt. I had experiences even of being in graduate studies and, you know, having a professor tell me that when I walked into the classroom, he didn't think I would have anything valuable to say. Telling me this at the end of a course and telling me that my performance in the course proved him wrong, right? He said that within 5 minutes of speaking, he knew that he would be incorrect about me and my ability to critically think. And it made me sad for him. It made me pity that he would think that way about Muslims. So I think one of the biggest misconceptions is just that we're somehow behind and backward, and this fits into all those like Orientalist historical tropes about us. But Muslims are really at the forefront of so much like cutting edge entrepreneurship, critical thinking, civilizational thinking, and awareness, particularly in academics as well, that I don't think people give us a lot of credit for.
Yeah, I mean, so, you know, growing up in Kenya, you know, we were always taught to give back, right? And so even when we didn't have much, we would go every Friday after mosque and give out, you know, Kenyan shillings basically to the homeless. Coming to Canada again, we didn't have much, but that, you know, belief of giving back was ingrained in us. So when I started my companies, I always tried to give back, you know, whether it was time or money or both. So I'd volunteer, and then eventually, you know, when I got some money, I would start giving back. So you know, the early charities were Stollery Children's Family Hospital Foundation, Kids Cottage, and you know, just organizations like that. So whether it was healthcare, education, arts, we would give back in that way. So Ben Stelter, I met him when he was 4 years old. There was a call out to our car group that said, you know, we're doing a birthday celebration for Ben. It's COVID, can't obviously, you know, meet him or do anything like that. And you know, he had been diagnosed with cancer. And so we all, you know, it was like, I don't know, 150 cars signed up to go drive by and wish him a happy birthday. And, you know, and they said, look, he loves, you know, red Corvettes. And so, you know, if you want to bring a gift, you know, feel free. So we had, you know, my son and I had bought a couple of Corvettes and things like that. And I had arranged with the Edmonton Police Service to also come, and they brought their community vehicle. So we did you know, like a motorcade, right, basically, because he loves the police as well. And so we did all that for him, and then we were told not to stop and just drive very slowly. So when my car got to his house, his dad ran outside, right, and just came right in front of me and stopped me. And I was, you know, a little bit freaked out, and I just stopped, and he says, can Ben get a picture? And the reason is my car had Connor McDavid on one side and Leon on the other side, and the other thing Ben loves is the Oilers. And so I said, yeah, of course. I got out of the car, let them take the pictures, and then went by. A few months later, Ben's dad reached out to me over social media and said, look, here's Ben's story. Ben's hero is Connor McDavid. He's never met him. He would love to meet him. And I said, you know, let me check, because there's a lot of rules around the NHL and COVID, right? And so I reached out to Connor and I said, look, here's the story. What do you think? He goes, you know, there's lots of restrictions. I said, I know. So let's do it at my house. We'll all wear masks. You know, we'll distance. We'll follow all the rules. And that's what we did. Now, we didn't tell Ben that. So, you know, we'd invited Ben's family. He came here. He thought he was here to play with our puppy, and, you know, and he was having a blast. Like, he was throwing a ball. You know, puppy would go fetch it. And then all of a sudden, there was a knock on the door, and I said to Ben, I go, I wonder who that could be. And, you know, we opened the door, and Connor walked in, and he just yelled, it's Connor, right? And he was just like, I've never seen a smile that big, you know, on anybody's face. And he was just glowing. And Connor spent like a good hour with him, answered all the questions. Ben had like a duffel bag yay big of stuff to sign, you know, everything from including a stuffed Connor rather, you know, where it was like a you know, like a little, like a stuffed animal, but it was a Connor McDavid look-alike. And so Connor even signed that for him, and just stuff like that. And then I spoke at an event, and there was a person sitting next to me from Scotiabank. And I just, my oldest son had done the Scotiabank skater experience. So I just said, it's a great program. I want to thank you. The kids loved it. It's a memorable thing. That night, it just occurred to me, I'm like thinking, maybe Ben could do that. So I Googled it, but the requirements were you had to be 12. Ben he just turned 6, but at that point he was 5. So I thought, that's a long shot, but let me reach out. So I reached out to this guy, his name's Brian, and I said, look, long shot, here's the story. Can anything be done? He goes, look, it's done in Toronto. It's a very strict process. There's an age limit, but he goes, let me try. He tried. Next day, he came back and says, yeah, we can do it. I said, okay, hang on, because I haven't talked to Ben's family yet. This was just, I don't want to promise anything until things were in motion. And so I reached out, and, Mike, who's Ben's dad, you could tell over the phone he was quite choked up. He's like, yeah, Ben would love to do that. And that was it, because I knew, our family had met him. We fell in love with him. I knew that the Oiler fans and the rest of the world would fall in love with him, and that's what happened.
It's just a comment on that.
Yeah, Ben's story again. The number of surgeries he's been through, the treatments, like it's in the hundreds, right? And yet he is a sign of hope, energy, laughter, and so to me it means, and it's a message to the world that we can all face various challenges, but never lose faith, never lose hope, always have fun and joy, right? And that's what he brings. He brings that joy to everybody. He brings that sense of, yeah, we can do this. Yeah, we can beat this. Yeah, we can get through this. It's a sense of hope. Yeah, I think the Muslim faith isn't known as well, as opposed to some of the other faiths. And I mean, being a Muslim, I know it's about, being kind, giving back, being charitable. So I think those key traits haven't really been communicated well. And so there's a misconception, right? It's not a faith known for its realities, and I think that's what we need to do, is convey that message more. There's a lot of notable Muslims, right, in our community just alone who have given back. I can point to folks, and I don't want to name names, but it's just they've donated significantly to the hospice center or to various educational institutions and so forth. And so there's a misconception sometimes that Muslims just look after Muslims, and that's absolutely not true, right? We do it for every faith. The Aga Khan Foundation, as an example, gives to every faith, right? They create schools, hospitals, etc., for all communities, not one specific community. And so there's a lot of Muslims in the community that are giving back, and I guess we're one example that gives back to everyone. Hi, my name is Ashif Maji. I'm a serial entrepreneur, a community builder, and a philanthropist.
Alhamdulillah, I think we actually have a really great presence within the interfaith scene here in Edmonton. Alhamdulillah, different mosques are really involved. I know the Al Rashid Mosque is quite involved in it. I think other mosques are quite involved as well. And I've been involved with that. And it's been amazing to sort of share our collective experiences, the challenges, the stigmas, the various pressures that sometimes we face that are shared challenges within the community on a school level, on sometimes an existential level. And I think, yes, absolutely, it does help us understand our needs a little bit better, not only as Muslims, but as individuals.
Yeah, mashallah.
Well, I think there's so many different initiatives. And again, it's a reflection of a really thriving and flourishing community. We have the initiatives driven by the young and the older community members, and it's fascinating. So from outreach services in making sure food baskets are being distributed to those who are perhaps less fortunate, for the various homeless shelters. So we have this presence and acknowledgement that we have a part to play, and that we are part of the community, and all members of society are part of our community, and we have a responsibility to them. So I think there's a greater presence in that. We also have amazing initiatives where we have women's shelter for women, fleeing domestic violence, and that's something again initiative from our own community to make sure that we're not looking and overlooking certain challenges that we find in all communities. In addition to that, we have different youth programs that vary from across the city, where their needs, be it physical activities, soccer, football, any of those sort of things that children would like to be involved in, swimming and whatnot, those things have been organized and provided and offered to our community members. Also collective barbecues, dinners, these sort of things that provide an opportunity for people to get to know one another. These are also things there. The Al Rashid Mosque was part of in the wintertime during the very terrible cold spell, one of the few religious institutes, I think, across Alberta that actually opened their doors to the homeless, which is quite remarkable, because there are different challenges you might think about doing that, but the masjid said that in the mosque or the religious center decided that it was more important to serve the community than to worry about simply the aesthetics of a building, which I think speaks to the spirit of Islam, which is that we're not focused only on this external outward sort of presence or devotion, but rather we're staying connected to what counts and what people they might need. So those are some of the things. Obviously, in addition to those things, there's a lot of community organizational sort of partnerships between existing social agencies here, like IFSA. We have an amazing, Islamic Family Social Service Association of Alberta. We have other organizations which are like C5 and others that are really it speaks to the fact that we're actually connecting and working along, along with other community agencies as well. I think the moment people will, or any individual will have an opportunity to engage with any person that's affiliated and sees or identifies as Muslim, I have no doubt that they will have a very positive experience. And I think this is something that's been shown in research as well, and I think the Pew studies as well in the States and others that have shown that when people actually engage with Muslims, they have a very positive opinion. In addition to that, the reality is we are as Muslims really facing an uphill battle where you have the narrative about what describes Muslims, be it the media, be it entertainment and the movies and the Hollywood and all of those different, and even the political language and how Islam seems to be politicized in various debates and vilified often. It's an uphill battle. So I think the moment we are able to overcome that, and Muslims we love to smile, we love to laugh, we love to eat, we love to socialize. And these are commonalities, but we love to care. We love caring. We genuinely love this idea of giving. And I think it's hard to dislike those qualities. And I think that's what, when people get to see Muslims, I think that's what they'll see. Islamophobia is such a, I guess it's so right now almost like the catchphrase that we hear everywhere. And, Islamophobia is a term that, obviously is attributed to fearing Islam. But right now I think it sort of sanitizes what that experience looks like. It's not simply somebody having a fear towards Islam. It's a real experience where people are sometimes emotionally, physically, attacked and abused, quite frankly. The stigma that's involved in that, be it a child that's excluded, being in their elementary, junior high, or high school years, to be mocked at for something that has happened somewhere else and constantly harassed and barraged with various, labels. That's beyond fear. So this is where I would like to point out that Islamophobia in its understanding needs to be brought a little bit away from that sort of macro sort of understanding and bringing it down. I was very much raised in a community where there were a lot of amazing people, beautiful people, but no, I was very much singled out at various points in my life, professional as well, for being Muslim. And that could mean the type of humor and the mocking that happens. That could mean the fact that There are people who are outrightly against you. It could impact, it could be seen as even colleagues in the type of humor that they think is okay. It can be the fact that our young people, the hijab and whatnot, those things are being pulled off. The resilience of the Muslim narrative is the one I think we need to focus on as well. Muslims have this grand sort of ability, first of all, that I see, to forgive. So it's not, as part of our faith, it's about liberating our own selves from ourselves, including resentment, including hate, including holding grievances forever. It doesn't mean that we turn a blind eye to things. We will continue to, as Muslims, I think our role is to stand up and try to correct society and make sure it doesn't harm itself, including us in it. But on the other side, it's about focusing on liberating ourselves from those emotions, where it now becomes, rather than being a negative weight on our story or something that defines who we are, we take it to something even greater. And we use it as a driving force to be the best that we can be, both as a Muslim and as a contributor in our society. And that's the story of our Muslims. You know, we look at amazing people who have made such an impact in our community. And believe you and me, they've suffered. But you know what? As I was sharing with one of my friends with the Edmonton Police Service, I said, even though that was part of my experience, even on a personal level, you know, being called names, etc., that actually never defined me, because it was very much against being Muslim. And I think that's something to be, I hope that can be shared with others as well.
When people think about Islam, so often they think about theology, right? They think about like someone picking up a Quran, or they think about someone quoting the Hadith, or, you know, they think about someone who looks a certain way or speaks a certain way. And the benefit of a garden, I think, is that it expands our definition to actually include how Muslims really live, which is we have lived historically in communities where there has been so much beauty and so much joy and so much community. And a lot of us come from spaces where those things happened in gardens, in public places that were open and accessible, where families would come on the weekends and have a picnic, or you would bring a soccer ball and play, or you would meet your future partner and go for like an escorted walk with your family, right? Like that is part of who we are. And that when we build or gift things that are about our lived experience as Muslims, that can actually do more for helping people understand who we are than quoting theology at people. And I think that has always been true of the way in which the Aga Khan has operated, that it's not just about the theology, it's about how do we live those ethics. And beauty is very much an ethical principle in that way. Yeah, I think one of the things that has been really beautiful to witness is the way in which grassroots networks of solidarity have built amongst Muslim women and amongst women of color, I think, more broadly, right? So I think what's unfortunate is that it came out of very difficult circumstances. So for the most part, a lot of us began out of hardship, out of instances of violence, out of instances of sort of experiencing a lot of really difficult challenges and pushbacks in terms of who we are in the world as Muslim women. And yeah, sometimes you just make lemonade, right? And so that's sort of what's happened, I think. Sisters Dialogue, I think, is a wonderful example. So, you know, they started as an initial kind of panel to have a conversation with Muslim women speaking about the violence that we had been experiencing in the summer of sort of 2020, 2021. And it has become this robust network of women that does a lot of incredible grassroots work. So I've been helping from my psych practice with healing circles, where we're doing art therapy, where we're giving Muslim women space to kind of have conversations that they couldn't otherwise. They've set up a Safe Walk program. They've done kind of like grassroots funding for women that like just need help making it through 2 years of pandemic. From the Muslim Feminist Collective, we
had put on an all Muslim production of the Vagina Monologues. Then we did an all women of color production of that with Black Women United. We were able to donate all of our funds to Indigenous organizations, to Black organizations. And so to see the solidarity build and to see women supporting one another in ways that I think are allowing us to live fuller lives and lives that are less constrained, I think has been really beautiful and quite powerful, actually. Yeah.